Hey beautiful people, welcome back to Angelic Embrace, where we document and narrate the glorious and life-changing near-death experiences sent in by you guys. It is greatly appreciated. So sit back, relax, know that you are loved, and let's get into today's near-death experience story. Consider subscribing and watching to the end to find out what happens. It was a sweltering day in August, and there were still a few weeks until classes began. I was going to a different Catholic school for the 5th grade. My friend who lives at the end of our gravel road had recently celebrated his birthday and received a pellet rifle as a present. He asked for my brothers and me to come view it, but while he was remodeling the room that houses our furnace with drywall, my father had us assisting him. While he worked on the ladder with the hammer, we would hand him nails. When I was younger, I had 4 brothers, and we rotated going to our mutual friend's house to watch him fire his rifle. Each of us had a chance. It was up to me to go next. Then it would be my brother, who is an identical twin's, turn. When I arrived at my friend's house, he was aiming his gun at blue jays who were perched in a tree on the other side of the field. While we were standing on a deck that was partially covered, he made the decision that he wanted to play draw. I was armed with a fake gun, and he was holding a real firearm with the safety engaged. A few minutes later, he removed the gun's safety in order to fire another shot at the birds. When he turned, aimed the pistol at me, and yelled, straight between the eyes. As he drew the trigger, he neglected to put the safety lever back on and accidentally fired the weapon. There was a total lack of light. After that, I looked up and noticed a brilliant light above me, so I proceeded in that direction. When I heard something moving below me, I looked down and saw that I was standing on the roof of the deck. When I turned around to look below me, I found my corpse laying on the deck. Then, the grandfather of my friend came out and said, "Look what you done. You murdered him." My companion let out a wretched and terrified groan before running away to hide in the stream that is next to the home. I did not believe that I had passed away. Suddenly, I found myself floating back into my body. I responded by saying that I believed the bullet had been deflected. It was stated that he was pleased to learn that. It wasn't so much about the bullet as it was the fact that I hadn't been killed. As I was falling, I heard the sound of my glasses crashing against the floor. My twin did not wear glasses with a thick frame as I did, since I needed my eyesight corrected. The doctor stated it was what prevented the bullet from penetrating my head any farther than it did. It had penetrated the frames, traveled into my eye socket, scratched my retina, and then became stuck around 1 inch into my brain. A lengthy period of time passed after the grandpa of a friend of mine placed a call for an ambulance. When my lens cracked, I felt shards of glass pressing up against my eye. Because I didn't want to do any harm to my eyes, I couldn't bring myself to open them. As they carried me down the stairs to the ambulance on a stretcher, I could feel the blood that had dried on my face. They made the necessary repairs to get me back on my feet and then referred me to a hospital where they would do surgery later that same day. I had a near-death experience that was very different 25 years later, when I was renting the same property with my 2 children after their mother passed away. During this NDE, I stepped into the light. This story will be recounted on a separate form. Next up is the subsequent NDE. Are you guys ready? Let's get down to business, all you lovely folks. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strong headache that was giving me a migraine. Since I was a youngster, I'd gotten headaches sometimes. Nevertheless, this particular migraine was excruciating, and I should have gone to the emergency room for treatment. On the other hand, given that I was caring for very small children at the time, I did not want to wake either of them or my husband, so I tried to give myself a treatment instead. I tried taking the medicine for migraines that was prescribed to me, but it did not give any relief from the discomfort. According to the instructions, the recommended amount of time to wait before taking the second dose is 1 hour. Nevertheless, I waited just 20 minutes before administering the second dose. I also took 2 non-prescription medications for headaches that I bought over the counter. My sensitivity to drugs has always been quite high, but at the time, I did not take this into consideration. My whole concentration was on finding some relief from the excruciating agony. After taking the pills, I quickly fell into a deep slumber and went back to my room to stay there. When I finally got to sleep, I would start gasping for air, which would wake me up. As soon as I started dozing off, I became acutely aware of the fact that I had stopped breathing. I was terrified that I would go to sleep and pass away. I prayed to God in a very basic way, saying things like, "Dear God, please don't let me die." I had always wanted to start a family and find a husband. As I was praying, the thought crossed my mind that God wouldn't hear me. During that period of my life, I had the impression that I did not matter. I was not certain that God existed, and even if he did, I did not believe that he would be aware of my existence. On the other hand, I was about to be shown that I was mistaken. I was resting on my back with my eyes closed, but I could feel a shadow thrown as something moved over my body, and then stood next to my bed. This occurred as I was sensing something move over me while I was sleeping. As soon as I felt the presence, I was startled, and I heard a line from the Bible play through my mind. An angel of the Lord stood by them, and the glory of the Lord shined round about them, and they were sorely afraid. I came to the realization that the Bible scripture had been transmitted to me telepathically, and that an angel had been sent to assist me. After then, I had the distinct impression that an angel had placed his hand exactly into my stomach. A thrill came over me that was unlike anything else I'd ever felt before. My abdomen and the rest of my torso were being moved by an unseen force. A vision of black and white static, similar to what one might see on a television screen with no reception, appeared to me in my head as well. At the same moment, I was aware of the presence of my late father, and I could hear him whispering into the ear on my right side. He reassured her several times that she would be okay by saying, "You're going to be all right. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." While my father was talking to me from the right side of my body and the angel was standing on my left, a very enormous and powerful presence hung over the entirety of my body. My internal picture abruptly shifted to that of a brilliantly blue waterfall as soon as I became aware of the significant presence. The lake was crystal pure and the most stunning shade of blue I have ever saw in my life. The sensation of tension that had been building up in my torso began to fade as I gazed in awe at the sight of the water, and it was soon replaced by the feeling of love pouring into my chest in torrents. I couldn't help but break down in tears since the love was so unadulterated and encompassing. My chest became so crowded with the love that it prevented me from expanding my lungs sufficiently to take a breath. The love was like a liquid that ran through my heart. I was conscious of the fact that I was having trouble breathing, but I did not let it bother me. Nothing else mattered to me because I was so overcome with happiness from the love. The thought came to me at that moment, this must be God. Because it was so enormous, unbounded, and all-encompassing, I had no doubt that the only appropriate term for it was God. When I first became aware that I was in God's presence, the first thing that went through my mind was, "Oh no, God is going to condemn me for taking too much medicine." I hung around to hear the verdict. It never materialized. I moved into the current of God in an effort to find his verdict. There was no sense of judgment present, not even a crumb. The endless flow of God consisted of nothing but unadulterated, loving love. At this moment, I had completely lost consciousness of my physical body. I could not for the life of me remember that I was a mother, wife, daughter, or friend. I have absolutely no memory of my existence on earth at all. I became one with an endless presence that cherished and cherished me in every conceivable way. The love revealed all. I had the impression that I was an awareness, a being that did not have a name or an identity, and that I was growing to fill the entire universe. I was at my house. I came to the conclusion that home was the place where I wanted to spend the rest of my life, and in my euphoric condition, it required every ounce of strength that I could gather to telepathically say, "Take me." I was aiming to convey the idea that I desired to be immersed in the genuine love for the entirety of time with these two sentences. It seemed as though I was getting closer and closer to the point when I would explode into a billion atoms and spend eternity with God as my presence continued to grow while I was in a state of happiness. I had already mentally prepared myself for the explosion, and I welcomed it with open arms. At the very last millisecond before the explosion of my essence and my utter emergence into infinity, God yanked me out of heaven, and I landed with a violent jolt in my body. I have no idea how I got here. I was so puzzled that I just laid in bed all day. Because of the flood of tears that I had shed as the love engulfed both my heart and my spirit, both my hair and my pillow were drenched. I do not know how long I was with God, but when I came back to my body, it was entirely cured. I do not know how long I was with God. It had been taken out of the refrigerator. My breathing was normal at the time. I was not sluggish at all, and there was no weirdness in my brain. After a migraine attack, my head would typically be extremely painful, to the point that even the act of combing my hair would be intolerable. At this point, I was able to press on my head without experiencing any discomfort or pain. I made an effort to make sense of what had just taken place. I was aware that what I had just witnessed was unlike anything I had ever encountered in my life on Earth. I made a deal with myself that if I did not feel any pain when I woke up in the morning, I would give myself permission to think that a miracle had occurred in my life. After some time, I was able to fall asleep, and when I woke up the next morning, my body showed no signs of having been affected by a migraine or the medication I had taken. I felt amazing. I can still picture myself standing in front of the mirror, combing my hair while attempting to come to terms with all that had taken place. When my closest friend called, I informed her that the night before, I had the privilege of witnessing a miraculous event. Thankfully, she accepted what I said as true, and she suggested that I go to a bookshop and look for a book on the subject of healing. I followed her advice, and as I entered the bookshop, I realized that I had no clue where to go for a book that may be of use to me. After that, I had a mental picture of something. It was a poster of the actors from the television program Touched by an Angel, and they were all smiling broadly. Despite the fact that I had never seen any of the episodes of the program, I made it a point to go to the part of the bookshop that was devoted to books about angels. I took a few novels that struck my attention, and I chose a page at random from one of the books to read. The very first paragraph that I read was about a woman who received help from an angel in the form of healing. During the process of her healing, she felt as though there was static in her body. I was taken aback by that. How was it that I was able to stroll into the bookshop and open a book that perfectly reflected what I had been through the previous night? It really blew my head. In my thoughts, I spent the following several days going over and over everything that had happened. After a few days, I came to terms with the fact that I had been miraculously cured after being touched by an angel, consoled in paradise by my earthly father, held in the boundless arms of God, and miraculously delivered from pain. The course of my life would never again be the same.